Hello and welcome to another tier list video. Today we are taking a look at vegetables' effectiveness as a weapon. So I did my vegetables tier list based on, how much do I like to eat them and use them in cooking. This time we're looking at if you had to use a vegetable as a weapon, let's say you're getting jumped in the middle of your garden and you got to reach for one of your vegetables to defend yourself. Which one are you going to want to grab? So starting us off, we have asparagus, which in my opinion, not really going to be the best weapon. I mean, asparagus, even if it's a fully grown, maybe you're looking at, I don't know, maybe a foot, a little more than a foot long. And asparagus, especially when they're raw, they're pretty easy to snap in half. So if you try and like hit somebody or poke them with it, it's probably just going to snap in half. And cooked asparagus, even worse. I mean, it's pretty soft. You're really not going to be able to do much with cooked asparagus. At best, you're going to be wanting to poke someone in the eye maybe with raw asparagus. That's really the best thing you're going to be able to do. Not the worst thing in the world, but asparagus, pretty underwhelming. Going to be down in the D tier. Up next, we have beets, which are another one that are not the best. When they're uncooked, they're pretty tough, so, maybe you could throw them, but the thing about beets, as you can see in the picture, is they kind of have that root that's attached, so it's not like a really perfect sphere, and they're just a little bit too small to like firmly grab like a softball and throw it, so you can't even really get a good throw with beets. It's kind of hard to throw them accurately, and hitting somebody with a beet, it's just not going to work that well. So beets, honestly, pretty bad, gonna be down in the D tier as well. Up next, we have bell peppers. Now these are a little bit better to throw. They're good, like, baseball or softball sized. And while they're not super hard, they are probably going to break when they hit somebody, so you're not going to deal a whole lot of damage. But, if you hit them in the face, get hit in the nose by someone throwing a bell pepper, it's probably not going to feel great. And, maybe the seeds are going to get in their eyes when it breaks open. So, not terrible. Decent for throwing. Could be better, but for me, it's going to be good enough to find in the B tier. Up next, we have broccoli. Now, broccoli, whether it's cooked or uncooked, I think is going to be pretty garbage. Even, when it's raw, it still falls apart pretty easily. If you throw it at somebody, sure, it might hurt a little bit, but if you hit them with the top part of the broccoli, it's like pretty soft. It's like throwing a pillow at somebody. Broccoli, cooked or raw, you're not going to be dealing much damage with broccoli. Definitely going to be down in the F tier. Up next, we have a cabbage. Now, if this is a raw, full head of cabbage like you see in the picture, you could maybe do some work with this, but usually they're pretty big, so it's kind of hard to throw well. It's almost like a small bowling ball sized, and it's not an easy thing to grip, really. So throwing it and, being able to hit somebody, especially if they see it coming, you can probably dodge a cabbage or just catch it. Really not that great for throwing, and I don't know, maybe you can hold it and beat somebody over the head with it. But cabbage is not the most durable thing in the world, so if you really just like swinging at somebody with a head of cabbage, it's probably going to fall apart pretty quick. So cabbage, definitely not the best, going to be down in the D tier as well. Up next, we have carrots. Now, carrots, they're kind of fitting a similar role of asparagus, where maybe you just want to poke somebody in the eye with them. Throwing them might be a little bit effective, but not great. However, if you have baby carrots, I don't know if you guys have done this, but if you snap them in half, and then kind of hold the bottom part that's like curved, and you like squeeze it between two fingers, you can kind of like launch them pretty far. We used to do this all the time at the lunch table back in high school and middle school. Definitely pissed off the lunch ladies, but we did it anyways. And that can be pretty effective because you can launch those pretty quick if you get a nice smooth baby carrot. You can really send them flying. So carrots, honestly, I don't like to eat them, but as a weapon, they're pretty viable. I'm gonna have to give them an A tier. Up next, we have cauliflower. Now this, I mean, as far as using it as a weapon, it's pretty much the same thing as broccoli. Maybe a little bit harder when it's uncooked, but cooked cauliflower, I mean, that's pretty much like mush. You're not going to do any damage with that. But raw cauliflower, like I said, it's going to be pretty similar to broccoli. Maybe a little bit better because it's a little bit tougher, but really not much, and it's not going to be enough to put it in the D tier, so still going to find itself in the F tier alongside broccoli. Up next, we have celery. Now, celery are kind of just like a bigger, slightly more durable version of asparagus, I would say. You can get some pretty big pieces of celery at the store, maybe like a foot and a half, maybe even a foot and 3/4, foot long. But yeah, celery, it's really not the best. If you hit somebody with it, it's probably going to break in half after one swing. So celery, not the best. Also going to find itself in the D tier. Up next, we have corn. Now, corn is really okay. You know, if it's still wrapped in the leaves, maybe it's going to be a little bit softer. But if you unwrap the corn and you hit somebody with that, I mean, you can pack quite a punch with corn. It's not that easy to break in half, so you know, it's not something that's great to, you know, throw at somebody. It's not that easy, but it's kind of like throwing a bowling pin almost. But you know, just holding a piece of corn, you know, you give someone a jab in the ribs with the corn, you know, it might work. So it's not the best, but hey, corn, good enough to find themselves in the B tier. Up next, we have cucumbers, which honestly, ballistically is relatively similar to corn, but I would say cucumbers are a little bit better to throw. Just a little bit more balance in throwing cucumbers in my experience. You know, you can really get a nice arch with them. You know, if you throw it just like you throw like a throwing knife or something. Jabbing them, you know, it's still useful, but I would, you know, if you're really going to stab somebody, I recommend corn personally. But cucumbers, it's okay with that, but I recommend throwing cucumbers. Still pretty good. Gonna find themselves in the B tier. Up next, we have eggplants. Now, I'll be honest, I don't have a whole lot of experience using eggplants as weapons. Only maybe once or twice in my life when things really got hairy, but eggplants, they're really okay. They're kind of big and cumbersome, and the shape of them, I mean, you can even see in the picture, it's not really a well-balanced shape, so it's really difficult to throw them. And if you hit somebody, the eggplant usually is just going to break. So eggplants, not the best. Going to find themselves down in the D tier. Up next, we have green beans. Now, honestly, pretty useless in my opinion. I don't know how you can deal damage with green beans. You know, you can't stab them with someone. They're too small and flimsy. You know, throwing them, it's like throwing sheets of paper. Like they just don't fly through the air very well. Too much air resistance. Green beans, not aerodynamic whatsoever. Green beans, they gotta be in the F tier. Up next, we have lettuce. Now, if you have something like a head of iceberg lettuce, you'd probably be in a similar category to cabbage. But lettuce, like we have here, you know, if you're thinking like leaves of lettuce, that's literally like throwing paper, and there's no way you're gonna deal damage to anybody with lettuce. So lettuce, unless we're talking, you know, iceberg lettuce and it's like a head of lettuce, you're not going to deal any damage, so lettuce got to find itself down in the D tier. Up next, we have mushrooms. Now, mushrooms, they're pretty soft, they're not great to throw, but they are disgusting, and a lot of people really hate mushrooms. So, even though physically you might not be dealing a lot of damage with mushrooms, emotionally and mentally, somebody getting mushrooms thrown at them, it might cause them a lot of distress. So, hey, physically, you're not going to deal a lot of damage, but it's all about the mental and emotional damage you can deal with throwing mushrooms. So they're still going to find themselves in the C tier. Not going to hurt them, but you're going to hurt them. Up next, we have onions, which is probably, in my opinion, the best thing to throw. You know, they're the perfect size, whether it's a red onion or a white onion. I mean, it's basically like throwing a snowball, but they pack a little more punch than something like bell peppers. I would say if you want to throw a vegetable, onions are probably your best bet. You get hit in the head by an onion, that's gonna hurt, honestly. They're pretty hard, they don't really break apart too easily on impact, and you can deal some pretty good damage throwing onions, so honestly, they're gonna be the first S tier. Up next, we have peas. Now, I'm gonna look at this from two approaches. We have pea pods, like you can see in the picture, which are not really great. They're gonna be about as useless as green beans, but if you have, like, you know, peas, like you got a bowl of like individual peas, you know, you pick up some of those and you throw them in someone's face. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. I haven't tried that, but I feel like that would be a bit better than throwing the entire pea pod. If you have a bunch of individual peas, maybe throw them on the floor, try and get somebody to slip on them. There's something there, maybe. We'll see. Give it a try and let me know. But peas, for now, they'll be in the D tier. Up next, we have potatoes. Now, this is another one that's really just good to throw. Hitting somebody or bashing somebody with a potato, that's not great. You're just going to end up making mashed potatoes, and that's not really what we're going for here. But potatoes, they're pretty good to throw, but they're not super hard. I mean, when they are uncooked, you know, they're not soft by any means, but they're not quite as hard as onions. But ballistically, they're still decent to throw, and they'll find themselves in the B tier. Up next, we have pumpkins. Now, Probably the most difficult weapon to handle on this list is pumpkins. Because throwing them, sure, maybe you have a small pumpkin that you can throw. That would probably hurt pretty bad. But if you're going to use a pumpkin as a weapon, I recommend using a bigger one and just, you know, hit somebody over the head with it, break the pumpkin on their head. When it breaks open, there's going to be, you know, the pumpkin mush that's inside spilling all over their head. And that's where you really deal the damage. With that pumpkin mush, if it gets in your hair, it's hard to get out. So pumpkins, honestly, going to be another A tier. Up next, we have radishes. Now, radishes, for me, in terms of a weapon, they're just a bit like larger beets, so maybe you can throw them a little bit, but especially if there's still the leaves attached like there is in this picture, that's really not what you want to go for when you're throwing something through the air. The leaves, they're going to have too much air resistance, going to make you miss. Radishes, not the best, going to be another D tier. Up next, we have red chili peppers, or really any kind of hot pepper. In terms of throwing them or, you know, hitting somebody with them, you're not going to be dealing much damage unless you're going for the eyes. So, you know, if you take the pepper and you break it open and then you go for the eyes, you know, there's something there. It's not the best. It's not easy, but it is possible. You can deal some damage. So, red chili peppers going to find themselves in the C tier because most of the time they're not easy to use, but they can be useful. Up next, we have spinach. You know, both to eat and to use as a weapon. That's an F tier. I don't think I need to explain too much about that. Sweet potatoes, they're pretty much just like potatoes, but usually a bit smaller, usually a little more oval shaped, and I will say usually a little bit tougher when they're uncooked. Cooked, they can still be soft, but uncooked sweet potatoes, they pack a little more of a punch than potatoes, but they are a bit smaller, a bit quirkier to throw, so they'll find themselves in the B tier. Up next, we have tomatoes. I mean, these are one of the classic vegetables as a weapon. I mean, you know, you think of people throwing tomatoes at people on stage when they are trying to boo them off. Tomatoes are just fantastic. They're not going to hurt, but when you throw them, they will pretty much always just burst, and they'll get tomato juice all over themselves. Just an overall fantastic weapon to use. In terms of damage, you're not going to deal a lot, but it is going to be messy. And tomatoes, they got to be in the S tier. Probably my favorite one to throw on this list, personally. Last, but certainly not least, is zucchini, which for me, you know, it's kind of in a similar vein to cucumber. The thing about zucchini is, though, is in this picture, it's relatively straight, relatively balanced, but a lot of the time, zucchinis you buy at stores are going to be a little bit curved, which makes them a little bit stranger to throw. Your best bet with a zucchini is probably just whacking somebody in the face with it. But that's just me. Zucchinis, they're alright, but I would prefer a cucumber, so they'll find themselves in the C tier. Well, that's my list. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you enjoy it.